ready to print this. It's sat overnight, so things are nice and dry. Now I'm going to show you a little bit of prepping, dampening paper and lining things up. So I'm just going to use a towel. So I want you to be able to see everything, so I'm just going to temporarily lay that over the top of the work area. And this is what I'm going to use to print on. It's very similar. Well, I think this actually is like the thickness of poster board. Poster board is not very expensive, but it's double ply, so it's like 2 to 3 times the thickness of regular bond paper, and it should work out well. I'm going to dampen it just by spritzing it with some water. And when you spritz it, you want to do both sides so that the moisture soaks through the paper and really makes it damp. The paper needs to be pliable, so we really need for it to be moist. I'm just going to let it set for a minute. I'm going to move it aside temporarily, and I'm probably going to blot this a little. I'm going to slide it between the towel and just blot it. I'm going to leave it there, move this aside, and I'm going to go ahead and prep the surface so that I can lay the paper down onto the plate and have it be nice in terms of presentation so that it's not printed crooked. And for that, you can make a registration template. This is one I picked up from the print studio. It's just a piece of mylar that's got different size rectangles on it. You can just use a regular sheet of paper. You can trace out the size of your plate just by making some marks at the corner, and lay your paper on this too and mark where your edges of the paper would be so that it's centered in relation to the plate, and just use that. You don't need a fancy template, but I'm just going to go ahead and use this here, and I'm going to set my plate by using some of the marks that are already on the plate or the template, and center this accordingly. That looks to be about center. And I'm going to get my dampened paper. Hopefully this is going to work. One thing about printmaking, it's a gamble sometimes, because you're not quite sure that there's so many variables in printmaking. Even something as the moisture in the paper can have an impact, or the thickness of the ink if you're using ink, or in this case the quality of the watercolor. Now I'm going to line this up and center it. It's like perfectly matched up to the width of this template here. I'm going to go ahead and drop it down. Now, because I need to apply pressure, I want to make sure that the paper doesn't shift or move on me while I'm doing this. So I'm going to use a little bit of this blue tape, and I'm going to tape it down gently. Tape it down on the bottom and the sides. Now, you can print by rubbing or by applying manual pressure, just like I'm doing here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply pressure a different way. I'm going to put a little thin sheet of felt down. Again, I use that from the print studio, and I'm going to use a rolling pin, and I'm just going to press, not extremely harsh with pressure, but I am going to apply a little bit of pressure here. And the reason for the blanket is I don't want the moisture to perhaps ooze out and push the watercolor around. is I'd like for the watercolor just to go straight up into the paper. So that's why you want to just be cautious about over-aggressive pressure. And let's keep our fingers crossed to see if we've got product or not. Okay. And just to finish this off, I'm going to use a little pressure directly now without the felt. I'm going to use the roller now. And by doing this, I'm applying a little pressure so that I can actually get a trace of the edges of the plate. If you recall from printmaking, you have what's known as plate marks, which are a sure indication that what people are looking at is a print. I'm going to take the tape off one side, and I'm going to hold it down. I'm just going to peel this back to see if things worked. Oh yeah, they did work. Now I want to try to pull a little more off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a little more moisture. I'm going to use the back of the plate, or the back of the paper. I'm going to let it soak in for a minute. And see if that'll loosen a little more of the watercolor. And hopefully it'll soak through. And that way we can pull a little more off the plate. I'm going to try using a little more pressure. Normally this is done with a printing press, but again, this is also a technique that can be done by hand without the use of a printing press. One of the few techniques that's possible to do without the use of a printing press is printing by hand. That's a traditional way that woodcuts are printed. And so I'm just going to do this. Okay. I'm going to drop this back on. See if we can push some of that moisture through to the other side. I'm using a little more pressure in my application here with the roller. Now it's kind of awkward for me to do this because I don't want to block the camera with my head. So I'm able to apply some pressure, but not as aggressively as I would like to because of the space limit here. So we got a little more to come up. Now one last thing, because I've taped my paper down, I'm going to apply this piece, hold it down again. I'm going to do one other thing here. I'm going to apply a little bit of moisture to the plate. Not too much. There. To loosen a little more of that watercolor. And I'm going to drop this back down. I'm going to let it soak into the plate a little. Now you can see that with what I'm doing here, you want to make sure that whatever space you're using at home, you protect it, either by putting down a sheet or a towel or even a tarp of some kind, one of those small tarps for painting the house. inside the house. You can double or triple it, fold it, and lay it on the table so that the watercolor or water doesn't get onto a table that's nice if you happen to be working on a nicer kind of table. Now I'm going to drop this back down carefully. See, another nice reason for taping and for measuring by using that template, it allows you a little more leeway to being able to make adjustments to your printing without having things shift on you and then have your print become all crooked and irregular in appearance. So again, I'm going to press. And I'm going to get a couple of passes without. You can see I'm getting a little more color popping through on the back side. So hopefully we're able to pick up a little more of the color. All right. There we go. There we go. Okay, I'm going to pull this off. All right, now here we've got the potential problem that happens from applying a little too much pressure. Let me remove the tape so we can take a look at this. Okay. See, when I sprayed onto the actual plate, of course that left a residue on the surface, moisture. So when I started to apply pressure, of course that moisture oozed. And let's take a look at it. And you see I've got this stuff here, but you can see that how much more I pulled off. So the next time, what I would suggest doing, and what I would do, is if I have to spray, I think what I would do to remedy this problem and not have to double or triple print is to really atomize the paper with more water than I did. And even if you have a small tray at home where you can actually submerge the paper into the water, you shouldn't need to double or triple print. You should get a wonderful impression the first time. But at this point, what I could do, since it's moist, the paper is moist, I can come back into this, and as I started to do the last time here, and it's hard to tell, but I don't believe any of the watercolor pencil marks showed up. So, but what I can do now is I can start to work directly in the plate, because the moisture that's in the plate is going to loosen and make the pigment from the pencil liquid, or liquefy it, soften it so that it leaves a mark onto the paper surface. I'm going to use a lighter green here. I could also dip the tip of the pencil, so what I'm going to do right now, dip the tip of the pencil in water and come back and add some lighter green to areas of my print before it has a chance to completely dry. And because, I mean, I could actually do this even when the print was dry, but might as well put that moisture to work and allow some of that moisture to impact a smooth application of the watercolor pencil. I'm even going to add some lighter foliage by using this to create image shapes by working directly on it. Plus, it also helps keep it more closely connected to being a print instead of just drawing on top of it when it's dry, which starts to change the integrity of it being a printed image. I can also come back and I've got a variety of hues here that I can use to add some variation to my image. I'm going to add a little orange into some of this landscape shape here or form. And it can work as a wash. If you put enough water in it, it can act as a wash, or it can make a stronger linear passage by minimizing the amount of moisture you add to the tip. Okay. Now, this isn't a disaster here. What I can do is when this is dry, I can simply trim that extra border off and make what we call a bleed print. A bleed print is a print that doesn't have a border. It goes from edge to edge, top to bottom, left to right. And so I can turn it into that kind of print. However, in order to do that, what I'd like to do is make it seem more intentional by working a little of this area close to the edge of the plate mark, so that it does give it the appearance that this is the end of the image here, instead of leaving this white space, so that when I do tear off the border, it's going to seem like I left something out. And so this prevents that from happening. And so I'm going to do a little more of this. I'm going to take another green, some of the darker green that I used in the actual watercolor at the onset, and bring some of that in here. So what I'm going to do is let this, I'm going to continue to work on this, but now you know how to print, and what I would suggest differently than what I did is to make sure that your paper has a little more moisture in it, so that we don't have to rely on spritzing it after we've printed to avoid the possibility of this happening, okay? And I do several of these, and I know you may at this point only have one plate, but if it's possible, you might want to secure a couple of other these inexpensive plastic plates and work on more than one, and that way they'll have sufficient time to dry so that you can do more than one printing at a time. And the reason why we're not printing right after working the image, you know, why is it important to let it dry overnight? Because if you create the image and then put paper over the top, because the pigment is so thick, what's going to happen is just simply going to ooze, and you're going to lose definition of your shapes. So if you let them dry, you'll solidify the shapes that were painted, and then the moisture in the paper will loosen the pigment so that it allows for the transfer of the image without sacrificing the clarity of your shapes. Okay, so let's take this as our first work in printmaking with watercolor, and then I'll provide you with another variation of connecting printmaking to watercolor with another example. Now, with the next example, you're still going to be using the same plates, but it's going to be important for you to have access to one tube of oil paint. Black. That's all you need. A black tube of oil paint and possibly a small bottle of solvent like turpentine. It'd be best if you use turpentine, if not paint thinner, but you will need that for cleaning up. But you're not going to make a huge mess with this because of the size of your plates. But I just wanted to show you how you can develop a matrix using the oil paint and then introduce the watercolor application process to the print after a printing done in oil. Okay, catch you in the next demo. Experiment, play with this, enjoy it. Let me know if you have any questions.